Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Andrew Moran, John Clark, Dave Patterson, and Graham Noble. And this is The Conservative Five, an online TV production of Liberty Nation News. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Seems the background music of Swamp Life indicates what was once a promising summer blockbuster might be akin to a woke bomb. After months of DOGE getting all up in everyone's business, Elon Musk is taking a step back. Why for? After unveiling for the electorate and all the world to see the bloated and massive ridiculousness of USAID, the Pentagon, billions in fraud and underhanded exchanges of shekels, well, now what? Was this all about tattling and embarrassing the past keepers of the crypt, or is anything actually going to be rectified? Say it ain't so, Dave.
But it is so. Fraud, waste, and abuse are synonymous with government, no matter how you look at it. And the larger the government, the more the problem. And that's what Elon Musk found right from the get-go. Basically, the reduction in the number of people employed in government is a positive step in the right direction, something that people have been trying to do for decades and unable to do it until Elon got involved. So, letting probationary hires go first, was wise, since those employees have not qualified for the full benefit. So that was a good idea. The only savings, however, and this is important to realize, the real savings are in the year of execution. So whatever savings or any reduction in cost in FY 2025, and that ends in September 30th, as those are savings. And as of April 30th, the savings figure is somewhere around $160 billion by some estimates. Claims of savings in the out year, that's a bit more problematic because those aren't savings. That's cost avoidance, and that allows for planning and to use those numbers that are available. And it also allows you to plan for a higher budget for priority items. The big ticket item was canceled in the U.S. Agency for International Development, and that netted $24 billion. And those principally are grants, contracts, and leases that you can cancel this year and reap the savings. Health and Human Services canceled another $15 billion, for example, in contracts, leases, and grants. And we know there has been criticism, of course, of the DOGE effort. The one I find amusing, though, is the Partnership for Public Service that claims the firing of government workers with paid leave and rehiring of those workers because of the legal challenge created a loss of productivity, which wiped out the cost savings. But just a second, wait, they were let go because they weren't needed. And you can't lose productivity if you don't have the productivity of the people who weren't productive to begin with. So, DOGE has done a good job, if for no other reason than it has shown a very bright light on a very big problem.
Sorry, Sarah, I have two questions for Dave. How much did DOGE apparently save total so far?
The estimate that they have is $160 billion. Other estimates are lower.
Okay, and then how much is the government spending this year?
They're going to spend more than the savings.
Okay, so $7 trillion is how much? Okay, so
That's a little bit
there. Sorry, guys. Also, I just wanted to clarify.
So my answer to that is they would have spent $7 trillion plus $160 billion. If this weren't the case, and spending has always been the problem, no matter how you cut it.
Okay,
$160 billion. I mean, what's that? It's about 2 months of interest payments that the U.S. government has.
Yeah, it's going to be. Congress is going to have to come to grips with the fact that they cannot continue to spend their way into rainbows and unicorns. It's just not possible.
Oh, darn it. I was kind of looking forward to ordering one off of Amazon. Well, and then there's this, not everybody is happy. Hey, Laura, back there, will you roll tape for us?
The GOP tax scam represents an assault on the economy, an assault on health care, an assault on nutritional assistance, an assault on tax fairness, and an assault on fiscal responsibility. There are more than 100 other reasons to vote against this one big, ugly bill.
Okay, Andrew. What about that big, beautiful bill or the big, ugly one? Or how's that going? How's that working in the Trump administration right now?
I just always find it comical when I see these lawmakers and there's something hand wringing about fiscal responsibility that they not pay attention to the last 4 years or during the Obama administration. So I find it's so frustrating to watch because I watch all these hearings related to taxes or the economy or finance. It just frustrates me. But anyway, so on to that one big beautiful bill. I will quote Elon Musk, who's on CBS Sunday mornings. Here's a quote of what he said. "I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it could be both." And he's absolutely correct. Yes, it is great that this bill it prevents about 2/3 of the country no longer experiencing a tax hike. It provides tax relief for families, provides tax relief for working class seniors and other non-billionaires, despite contrary to what that clip said. The problem, which is always the case, and Dave alluded to this, is the spending side. So here's a dichotomy. The Congressional Budget Office, yes, I'm not in love with it, but it's still mostly reliable, as I have told Graham in the past. It projects that the U.S. government is going to spend about $89 trillion over the next 10 years. This OBBB, it projects to spend about $88 trillion over the next 10 years. That's $1 trillion. And that's the House version. The Senate version, it actually increases spending by $2 billion over that span. So it's absolutely ridiculous. I wrestle with this because I think of what Milton Friedman said, the legendary economist. He said that you should, under any circumstances, always cut taxes. But the problem is that I don't know if he envisioned the United States government spending $1 trillion just on interest payments alone. You have a $7 trillion budget. In 10 years, it's going to be about $10 trillion according to the CBO. Now, yes, I will also concede the CBO was off about $1.5 trillion by the TCJA in 2017. The rescoring showed that the revenues were much higher than expected and growth was higher than expected. But it always comes down to the same thing of the outlays. And the only way you're going to grapple with outlays, and President Trump doesn't want to say this, and many prominent Republicans don't want to say this, is that you're going to have to eventually tackle the mandatory side of spending, which accounts for 2/3 of all annual outlays. And according to CBO, in a decade, it'll account for about 70% of all outlays. So this OBBB, if you're a fiscal conservative who worries about the deficit and debt, it's going to add, just be conservative, it's going to add $3 trillion to the deficit. Now, even if you achieve, let's say, 3% growth, which Stephen Moore's group, Committee to Unleash Prosperity, says could happen, it's still going to add about $1 trillion to deficit. So it's overall, it's still deficit finance spending, and it's only going to worsen America's fiscal situation.
I might be the only guy out on this, and I'm sure Graham's going to fillet me in a minute, but I'm going to ask John Clark. I mean, is what's going on with the GOP and this hand-wringing, pearl-clutching, grenade-throwing group of people trying to get this bill passed, is it just compromised the way it should work, or does the GOP need to grow a pair? I'm just asking for a friend.
Well, that's really quite interesting. We saw the clip, and it's not like the compromise is being worked out with Democrats at all. It's almost like,
we never think
they're not in the room. It's between Senate Republicans and House Republicans. And, I actually echo Andrew's idea. They know in Canada about deficit spending. We should talk about the Canadian budget sometime. But yeah, fundamentally, I think it's $3.8 trillion it's estimated to add. And I think Dave would agree that $160 billion doesn't chop that. But the real battle seems to be going on about the Senate Republicans, many of them wanting more cuts, more spending cuts. And politically trying to not have so many changes that it kicks back to the House and then eliminates that one vote margin. And so there's a lot of, infighting going on within the GOP. But interesting, Andrew also mentioned cutting spending. I mentioned in one of my articles recently about pharmaceuticals. If Donald Trump let's say he cuts $25 billion in annual spending from federal programs in prescription drug savings, then the Democrats will say, look, he cut Medicaid and Medicare. It's like if you save money, they call it taking money away from the poor. And yes, I hear this also. Oh, it's going to help billionaires. It's going to help billionaires. I think it doubles the standard deduction, and the no tax on overtime and tips were mentioned. I don't really see big advances here for the billionaires. And one thing Republicans should probably know more, and Real Clear Politics had a good opinion on this today, is that, cutting these benefits, if it means cutting trans surgeries, if it means cutting Medicare or Medicaid for illegal immigrants, if it means affirming addresses to know that multiple people aren't collecting, eliminating fraud is not killing people, as the Democrats are saying. And so, the Republicans are really fighting too about the debt ceiling. They're fighting about the long-term deficit. They should be fighting about that. But they also have, I think, a mid-July deadline, in which case the ceiling kicks in. So there is a political expediency. I think a lot of us would like to see a zero increase in the total national debt. But we're working with what we have, and so in answer to your question, I think balancing the battling within the GOP and then still getting a bill together that the House will accept is where success lies, and that seems to be where the focus is. Many want more cuts.
I love what Senator Ron Johnson said. Sorry, Graham. I love when he said, he was asked about, if he says this is a terrible bill, and he was asked, what if you perturb President Donald Trump by voting against this legislation? And he said, I don't give a damn what Trump thinks or says about how I feel about this bill. That was good. Maybe I'm just paraphrasing, but that's what he said.
Oh, well, that was fun. Anyway, Graham, what's the next logical fiscal step, or is there even one?
We're dealing with here. We're dealing with government here, so the words fiscal and logical, probably shouldn't even be in the same sentence.
Sorry, yeah, that was my bad.
But the problem is, it is heartening, at least, even though it doesn't really do us much good at the end of the day. It is heartening, at least, to know that between the House and the Senate, there are actually a handful of Republicans who are really hardcore about we need to cut spending. And as Andrew said, it's not just discretionary spending. You can cut all of that you want, but we do have to look at the mandatory spending because that's the biggest part of it. And again, throwing in what John said there, the way you do that, or the way you begin, is to absolutely eliminate the real fraud, the real abuse, the real waste, the money that is actually going to people that don't need it or don't deserve it or just not eligible for it. And at some point you got to do that. But, no politicians other than the handful I just said, not by name, but there are a handful, but most of them, they never want to cut any money, and the Democrats don't. But at least the Democrats, I'll say one thing for Democrats, at least they don't pretend to be fiscally responsible. They don't even try to fool anyone that they are. Republicans always going on about being fiscally responsible. And I would say 75% of elected Republicans are not fiscally responsible at all. And they don't really want to make these big cuts. But at the end of the day, the next real logical step, because look, if you've got an incredible amount of waste at the Department of Education, you don't cut the waste out of the Department of Education, you get rid of the Department of Education. And at the end of the day, that's the only way that the US federal government is ever going to substantially waste money and get to the point where they can maybe even reduce the national debt, is you've got to shrink the size of government by a whole bunch. I mean, my reading of the Constitution tells me that the only federal government departments there should be is the Department of Justice, the Department of State, and the Department of Defense. Beyond that, I don't see any constitutional justification for any other government departments at all. But that's just me.
Sarah, before you go, I just want to say, I have a proposal here, and I think Dave is going to be 100% behind you.
You better get on it, Andrew. Stop.
How about this? End all foreign wars, stop the coups, and trim the Pentagon budget by 75%. There you go. That would save a lot of money, huh, Dave? What do you think?
What have you got against?
He just derailed the whole segment, Andrew. You got to just sit still for a minute. Good grief!
As a Scotsman, I've got to ask, what have you got against the coups, Andrew?
Yeah, no.
Coos, or is it their flatulence from the coos?
All right. The cows are getting lively. Now, look, we all have to wait in the game of governing, but I think we got to ask ourselves, will this Trump econ bomb bust the budget? Will it grow the economy? Can it do both? I think we're just kind of standing on the cliff waiting for something to happen. And come stand with us, people. We'll let you know what's going on as soon as we know it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, panel. Andrew, sit down. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, well, we're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Now, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for the latest news and commentary. Your choice for free thinking, free speech, libertynation.com.